skilled nursing facilities. Finally, we've handed out nearly $20 million in cash assistance through Angelino cards. We've also had business ambassadors who are working hard and through to be able to help businesses reopen at thousands, now over 2,800. More than 1 million meals to have awarded microloans to our businesses now at $1.9 million. And we'll continue to push forward with those. I hope later in the week to share with you too in this moment, not only how we are addressing COVID-19, but to address some of the underlying calls for justice and for investments that are ongoing in our communities. Happy to answer questions about COVID-19 as well as, of course, what's at hand. But I thank you all for the work you will do to be safe tonight, to abide by the curfew, to stay at home also when you're allowed to be out whenever possible, and to move forward. With that, be happy now to answer questions.
All right, you've been listening to Mayor Eric Garcetti, as well as LAPD's Chief Michael Moore, as well as LA City Fire Chief Ralph Terrazas, all talking about the safety to try to restore and safety to the community. All three stress the importance of people adhering and abiding by the curfew, which will go into effect in about less than 15 minutes, 6 a.m. So unless you're an essential worker or you need medical help, you need to stay home or go home.
And we'll have, of course, have more coverage on how effective that curfew is. We have our reporters fanned out across Southern California, and we know that this is a complicated issue. We want to give you a chance to make your voice heard. So please head to abc7.com to tell us video or picture or write us a paragraph. We want to hear you. We hope to share some of your responses on the air and online.
Also, now moving on, we have been seeing thousands of protesters gathering across the Southland this afternoon.
Inland Empire Bureau Chief Rob McMillan live now for us in Riverside, where a big group of protesters making their voices heard at this point as well. What are you seeing out there, Rob?
Well, very fortunate to this point, extremely peaceful protest here in downtown Riverside. People started gathering around 3 o'clock this afternoon in the park right across from the Mission Inn Hotel, and the crowd grew to close to 4,000 people, and around 4 o'clock they poured out into the street. Now, interestingly enough, and we see this with a lot of the big protests around here, the police department has taken a very hands-off approach to this point. Riverside Police Department, as well as Riverside County Sheriff's Department and other agencies, is here in force, but they're not visible. In fact, we have seen very few police officers, with the exception of a few motorbikes that went by about 30 seconds ago. Very few police officers here, and that's by design. I was speaking with a spokesperson with the Riverside Police Department who tells me that's what they're trying to do. They don't want to agitate any of these folks. They want to allow them to protest and do so peacefully. And it's been very loud, very large. We estimate close to 4,000 people out here right now. Obviously, they're in the streets. They shouldn't be doing that. But the Riverside Police Department content to let them have their way and exercise their voice. As we've been saying, I mean, you have a lot of people, decades and generations of pain and anger that have built up, and it's really spilled out over the past week. And so the police department content to allow these people to protest. Again, the curfew, though, is set to hit in about 10 minutes. So it will be interesting to see what happens when we hit that 6 o'clock curfew here in Riverside. But most would agree, a very peaceful protest at this point. I asked the police department, has there been any property damage or anything like that? They said only one report of a window broken out in a vehicle, but they haven't even been able to really investigate that yet. So at this point, very loud, but very peaceful in downtown Riverside. Rob McMillan, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, Rob, thank you very much. Let's take a look now. Here, of course, on the first night of the protesting, downtown LA was one of the focal points, and there were, what we're seeing now has been largely peaceful, although there have been National Guard troops that have been stationed outside LA City Hall, and we're going to keep an eye on things now. Right now, there you see the curfew's about to begin in about 10 minutes in the city of Los Angeles. The mayor calling on people to come home, and you see a group of demonstrators here. Trying to see where this is. And you see police there lined up in front of it. That is LAPD headquarters. I thought it was, but I wanted to be sure of it before I said it. You've got some National Guard troops who are stationed there as well. And the protest, the demonstration here in front of LAPD headquarters, peaceful so far. I don't see any scuffles. I don't see anything going on there.
Yeah, and you see the National Guard right behind the LAPD officers. Again, we were talking about this. You see the National Guard out when they're deployed. You certainly know it's very serious. You can see one of the officers on a megaphone obviously talking to the crowd, but we do have that curfew. It goes into effect in about 8 minutes or so, so it will be interesting to see if this crowd disperses and does go home. And also what we've been seeing, many of the sort of landmarks that need to be protected, they've been putting up these steel barricades to keep people away, and they certainly have kept this this building and this environment very safe between the LAPD officers and the National Guard right behind them. So an added level of safety and security there.
And it's a literal representation of what the Guard is here to do. They are supposed to literally back up the LAPD, and you're seeing them actually physically doing that at this time. It's the police who are supposed to be on the front line facing off against demonstrators. You don't want military people doing that if you can possibly avoid it, not because they are not good people, but because they're not trained specifically for this sort of mission. And you've got police officers who are trained and who are trained in crowd control and how to work together in a situation such as this, and trained not to react, not to overreact, and that is the intention here. As we move on, the death that we have witnessed, the destruction that we have been witnessing is especially disturbing for children and teens. A USC specialist for what is called psychological first aid has 5 steps that can help children in these turbulent times. She shared them with Eyewitness News reporter Miriam Hernandez.
If you have been horrified by it all, a child trauma specialist says, imagine what it's doing to an impressionable mind.
Is this real? Can this really be happening? Can this happen to me?
From the death of George Floyd under the knee of a white officer.
If I can't trust the officer on the street, who do I trust?
To the behavior of adults. Strategies for crisis recovery based on science have been honed at the USC School of Social Work. Yet this unrest is unlike any other, including the LA riots. Professor Holly Priebe-Sotelo says today's scenes on social media are unfiltered, inescapable, and damaging.
Even in 1992, when the civil unrest happened in South LA, today what we have is more exposure.
The response, a 5-step.
Be good role models to these young people.
Miriam Hernandez, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Psychological first aid. Wow.
All right, well, there is much more news coming up on Eyewitness News at 6 o'clock. Here's Ellen Leva with a preview.
Ahead at 6 o'clock, the latest on breaking news as peaceful protests turned sideways. A demonstration in Van Nuys was declared an unlawful assembly when looters started to hit nearby stores. Plus, some local businesses trying to protect their property with more protests planned across Southern California. These stories and breaking news as it happens, all coming up on Eyewitness News at 6.